The wrench slipped and split Maya Stone's knuckle wide open. Blood smeared across the oil pan beneath the '99 Chevy Blazer as she hissed through clenched teeth, shoved her hand against her shirt, and kept working. The heat in the garage pressed down like a physical weight, not just hot but dense, a stifling mix of burnt oil, old rubber, and metal dust that clung to her lungs with every breath. Outside, the sun had pushed past 105 degrees by noon and showed no sign of mercy. She hadn't touched water since 9 that morning, but the blazer under her wouldn't wait. Neither would the landlord. Neither would the power company. Neither would life itself, grinding forward, whether she could keep pace or not. She tightened the last bolt on the radiator mount, torque wrench reading 68 foot-pounds, exactly because she'd replaced this same mount on a '98 model 3 times before and knew the specs by heart. The bloody rag went back in her pocket. The hood slammed shut with a clatter that echoed across the empty lot, bouncing off the peeling walls of Yazzie Auto. Her father's old place looked more like a junkyard than a working business. The sign had lost most of its paint years ago, and 2 windows had been patched with cardboard since spring. Customers had dried up to almost nothing. The tribal road projects had pulled most mechanics into better-paying government contracts, and everyone else in Red Mesa either fixed their own vehicles or drove them until they died on the side of the highway. Maya hadn't seen a full paycheck in 4 months. Just tips. Just kindness from people who had almost as little as she did. Just surviving one day at a time. She stepped into the cramped office and dropped into the torn swivel chair behind the desk. Sweat soaked through her shirt and into the cracked vinyl seat. The fan in the corner rotated left to right with a rhythmic squeak, pushing hot air in lazy circles that did nothing but remind her how little had changed in 5 years. The small drawer where she kept client records opened with a scrape of warped wood. Inside sat an envelope she'd been counting and recounting for 3 days straight. 5 crumpled 20s, 4 10s, a handful of singles and some coins that barely added up to anything. $127.34. Not enough to cover the $389 power bill sitting on the desk corner, past due stamp glaring red. Not enough to buy both the inhaler refill Ethan needed and the shoes Riley had been asking about for 2 weeks. Not enough for anything except the sick feeling in her stomach that came from doing math that never worked out right no matter how many times she tried. She buried her face in her hands. The fan squeaked on its pivot. Her fingers came away smelling like blood and motor oil. "Mom!" Maya looked up. Ethan stood in the doorway, barefoot, despite her telling him 100 times about the broken glass and rusty metal scattered across the property. Sweat shined on his round cheeks. His hair stuck up in tufts that made him look even younger than 8. The Captain America backpack hung from one shoulder, never far from his side, no matter where he went. His t-shirt was inside out. Again, she didn't have the heart to fix it. "I'm hungry." The words hit her chest like a physical blow. "I know, baby. I'll make something soon." He shifted his weight from foot to foot, small and uncertain. "Is there dinner?" Her stomach turned over. The lie came easier than it should have. "Yeah, we got noodles." He nodded with the kind of trust that made her want to scream. 8 years old, and he believed every word she said because that's what kids did. They believed their mothers would take care of them, would feed them, would keep the lights on and the roof overhead. "Can we eat in the living room and watch the cowboy movie again?" "Sure, go put the DVD in." He vanished down the hall, dragging the backpack behind him like it held everything he owned. Maybe it did. Maybe that's why he never let it go. Maya turned back to the desk, to the bills, to the suffocating mathematics of poverty that squeezed a little tighter every single day. The phone buzzed against the wood surface. Unknown number. She let it ring. Then it rang again and again. She snatched it up, voice flat. "Yazzie Auto." "Ms. Stone, this is Mara at Red Mesa Property Management. Just a reminder, your rent is due by Friday or we'll have to initiate eviction proceedings." "I know. It's the 3rd time this year we've had to call." "I said I know. I'll figure it out." A pause on the other end. Professional sympathy that meant absolutely nothing. "I hope you do." Click. She set the phone down with the kind of careful control that came from wanting to throw it through a window, but knowing she couldn't afford to replace it. On the wall behind the desk, sun-faded photos of her father hung crooked in their frames. Him smiling with a wrench in one hand, her hanging off his arm like a monkey when she was small enough to believe nothing bad could ever happen. He died at 5 years ago. Stroke out of nowhere, dropping him in the middle of rotating tires on a customer's truck. He'd left her the garage and $18,000 in debt. No instructions, no warnings, just the assumption she'd know what to do. You don't run, you don't sell out, you stand your ground. That's what he would have said if he'd had the chance. So she'd stood and kept standing and tried not to notice how the ground kept crumbling underneath her feet. Her eyes drifted across the wall where the town pinned their flyers. Swap meets, missing dogs, powwow dates. Nothing that mattered, nothing that could save her. Then she saw it. Bright yellow paper curling at the edges, half hidden behind a notice about water restrictions. She hadn't noticed it before, or maybe she had, and her brain had filed it away under problems too big to think about. Coconino County Land Auction. Public notice. Property designation Callaway Ranch. Adobe structure. Unsafe. Sold as is. No warranty. No utilities. Starting bid $500. Maya pulled the flyer down, fingers leaving smudges on the cheap paper. $500. The number sat in her mind like a stone. She had 127 and change. If she fixed 4 cars this week, maybe she'd clear enough to scrape together my 100 by Saturday. Maybe. Callaway Ranch. No one in Red Mesa talked about it much anymore. Not since whatever happened out there back in the 80s. Fire or shooting or both, depending on who told the story. The old Hollywood actor, David Callaway, had lived there once, built it with movie money and desert dreams in the 60s, then died alone. The family never came back. The place just sat there in the foothills, hidden behind red rock and mesquite, waiting. 15 acres with a house. No mortgage, no rent, no landlord calling every month with threats that got closer to real every time. Ridiculous. She had $127 and a kid who needed medicine. She couldn't even fix the AC in the mobile home, let alone renovate a house in the middle of nowhere that probably had no plumbing and rattlesnakes under every floorboard. But her hand didn't let go of the flyer. She stared out through the smudged window at the garage lot shimmering in the heat. Ethan's backpack leaned against the workbench where he'd dropped it. From somewhere inside the mobile home, the tinny music of an old Western drifted out from their secondhand DVD player. The kind of story where someone on the edge of everything finds just one reason to push back against the weight, trying to crush them flat. The thought landed hard in her chest. Maybe it wasn't about being ready. Maybe it was about having nothing left to lose. Maya folded the flyer slowly, carefully, and slipped it into her back pocket. The fan in the corner creaked on its swivel. Somewhere behind her, Ethan laughed, high and hopeful. She stood, grabbed the bloody rag, wiped her knuckle again, and walked toward the house, the heat pressing into her shoulders like the weight of a decision already made. The bell above the door gave a lazy jingle as Maya stepped into Red Wing Trading Post. Cold air hit her skin like mercy, chilling the sweat on her back and neck. For a moment she just stood there, blinking against the sudden contrast, letting her lungs fill with something other than garage fumes. The place smelled the way it always had. Dust and jerky, sage bundles and faded candy. Behind the counter, Clara Redwing didn't look up from her ledger, pen moving across columns with the precision of someone who'd been keeping books since before Maya was born. Still keeping that truck alive? Barely. Radiator cracked like dried tortilla. Clara snorted, flipping a page. That thing's been dying since 2010. Maybe let it go. I would if I could afford to. That earned a glance. Clara's eyes, sharp behind square glasses, flicked up and studied Maya for a beat too long. The woman saw through most people. She had a soft spot for those who didn't flinch when she stared. Maya set the folded flyer on the counter. Clara's pen stopped moving. She didn't touch the paper, just looked at it like it might bite. What's that? Land auction notice. County's offloading the Callaway Ranch. Clara took her time setting down the pen. Then she picked up the flyer and read every line like maybe something had changed since the last time she'd seen one just like it. Finally, she looked up. Huh. That's all you got? Huh? You don't want that place. Why not? Clara leaned forward, elbows on the counter, voice dropping to near whisper even though they were alone in the store. except for a tourist browsing turquoise jewelry near the back wall. Because that property is off. Always has been. People don't just walk away from 15 acres with a house on it. That land's been empty almost 40 years. You ever ask yourself why? Maya crossed her arms. Because the owner died. He did, but that's not why it stayed empty. Clara glanced toward the tourist, then back. 3 people tried to buy it over the years. One crashed his truck a week after closing. One went bankrupt trying to fix the place. Third guy had a heart attack in the driveway right there by the gate before he even moved in. You believe that stuff? I believe in respecting things I don't understand. That sounds like fear. Call it what you want. That house doesn't want the let it lived in. Maya leaned closer, matching Clara's intensity. I'm not looking for ghost stories. I need a place to live, a real home. I can't keep bouncing around with broken heaters and leaky roofs and landlords who threaten eviction every other month. If I can buy that land for $500, it's a damn miracle whether the house stands or falls. Clara studied her again, that long, measuring look that seemed to add up everything Maya was and everything she wasn't. Then she tapped one long fingernail on the counter edge. You go up there, take someone with you. That road's bad. And if you do win the auction, she paused, lowering her voice even more. Don't go digging where you don't need to. Maya shook her head and turned toward the door. Clara's voice stopped her. Wait. She reached under the counter and pulled out a small cloth bag. Inside were 2 bundles of dried herbs bound in red twine, sage and cedar, mixed together in the traditional way. Burn them in the doorway before you step inside. Might not help, won't hurt. Maya took them without a word, tucked them into her jacket pocket, and stepped back into the sun. The rest of Red Mesa wasn't any more encouraging than Clara had been. At the tire shop, old man Davis laughed outright when she mentioned the ranch. At the community center, Mrs. Natani gave her a long look and said if she felt something wrong up there, get out fast because some places carry grief like sickness. Even Levi, her part-time helper at the garage, raised an eyebrow when he overheard her on the phone with the auction office. You trying to get haunted? Maya ignored them all. She didn't believe in cursed land or angry ghosts or dead actors with unfinished business. She believed in cracked foundations and mold behind walls and sun damage and maybe snakes under the floorboards. Real things that could be fixed or at least understood. But that night, after she tucked Ethan into bed and kissed the top of Riley's head, while the girl pretended not to need it, she sat alone at the tiny kitchen table in their rented mobile home. The dying light bulb overhead cast weak yellow light across the auction flyer. She pulled out the sage bundle Clara had given her and ran her fingers along the rough twine, just in case. The next morning, a truck pulled into the garage lot while Maya was elbow-deep in an engine rebuild. She recognized the sound of the diesel before she even looked up. When she did, her jaw tightened. A silver Lexus SUV, too clean and too expensive for Red Mesa's dusty roads, rolled to a stop near the open bay door. The engine cut off. The driver's door opened. Preston Whitmore stepped out in a suit that probably cost more than Maya made in 3 months. Rolex catching sunlight as he adjusted his cuffs. Real estate developer, land flipper, known throughout the county for buying distressed properties and turning them into luxury developments that priced out everyone who'd lived there before. He smiled the way predators smile before they strike. This the place? Yazzie Auto? He looked around the garage with barely concealed disdain, taking in the peeling paint and cardboard windows in oil-stained concrete. Heard you're thinking about Callaway Ranch. That's adorable. Maya straightened, wiping her hands on a rag that was already too dirty to do any good. She didn't say anything, just waited. Sweetheart, that property needs $200,000 minimum to be livable. You fixing radiators for what, $80 a pop? The condescension dripped from every word. 2 customers near the air compressor stopped what they were doing to watch, witnesses to her humiliation. Auctions open to anyone with $500. Whitmore laughed, the kind of laugh that said he found her precious, empathetic, in equal measure. Oh, I know. I'll be there, but let me save you the embarrassment. That land's worth millions once it's developed. I'm bidding $50,000 cash to start, so why don't you go back to your wrenches and leave real estate to people who understand money? He turned to leave, still chuckling, shaking his head like he'd just heard the world's saddest joke. The Lexus purred to life. Gravel crunched under premium tires as he drove away, taking his contempt with him. The customers glanced at Maya, then quickly looked away. Clara appeared in the garage doorway, arms crossed. She must have heard everything. "Don't let him get to you." Maya's voice came out quieter than she intended. "I won't." But that night she sat at the kitchen table and counted her cash again. $127.34. She pulled out a calculator and did the math for the 100th time. If she fixed 4 cars by Friday, maybe cleared $80 each after parts, that would give her roughly $507 by Saturday morning. If Riley walked past, headphones in, and paused long enough to see what her mother was doing. The calculator, the worn bills, the desperate arithmetic of poverty. "Mom, what if you lose? That's all our money." "I know." Ethan appeared in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "Can we have a real house?" Maya looked at both of them. Her children, her responsibility, her reason for every choice she'd made in the last 8 years. "I don't know if we'll win, but if we don't try, we definitely lose." Saturday morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. Maya left the house at 5:30, darkness still thick across the desert. Riley stayed with Clara. Ethan slept in the back of the truck, curled around his backpack like always. The drive to Kayenta took 74 miles. Most of it empty highway where the only other vehicles were semis hauling cargo to somewhere that mattered more than here. The courthouse sat square and squat in the morning light, sun-stained concrete with sand caked in the corners of the steps. The parking lot was nearly empty. Maya sat in her truck with her hands still on the steering wheel, watching a plastic bag blow across the pavement in the wind. She'd withdrawn $500 in 20s and 10s because they were easier for the clerk to count. The bills sat in an envelope on the passenger seat. Everything she had, everything she could scrape together. If Whitmore showed up and bid even $550, it was over. Inside, the room smelled like old coffee and carpet glue and something faintly metallic. A fan rattled in the corner. 12 metal folding chairs faced a small wooden podium. Maybe 10 people scattered across the seats, mostly older men in work clothes. A couple in ball caps, one man in a white shirt with sleeves too crisp and clean for this part of the world, and Preston Whitmore, front row, leather folio in his lap, smartphone on top, looking like he owned the building and everything in it. He saw Maya enter. The smirk returned. He leaned over and whispered something to the man next to him. They both glanced back at her. Maya signed in at the folding table near the door. The clerk handed her a paddle with 17 written in black marker and a single sheet listing the property details. Parcel number, approximate acreage, one uninhabitable structure, no guarantees, sold as is. She took a seat near the back. Whitmore turned and gave her a little wave, mocking and dismissive. The auctioneer was a woman with gray hair and a voice that cracked on the hard syllables. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Quick greeting, list of rules, then straight into the lots. Tools first. Some vehicles. County seized furniture. Maya tried to pay attention, but her leg bounced with every breath, adrenaline making her skin feel too tight. Then the auctioneer's voice cut through the fog in Maya's head. Next up, real property. One parcel, approximately 15 acres unincorporated land, located at 618 Coyote Ridge Road, known locally as Callaway Ranch. One structure, adobe, extreme disrepair. Bidding starts at $500. Maya's hand went up before she could think about it. 500. Whitmore didn't even turn around. His voice boomed across the small room. 5,000. People shifted in their seats. Whispers started. That was a huge jump. The auctioneer blinked, surprised but nodded. "We have 5,000. Do I hear more?" Maya's heart dropped into her stomach, but her voice stayed steady. 510. Whitmore laughed. Actually laughed out loud. 10,000. More whispers. Someone near the front muttered about the woman who couldn't possibly compete. The auctioneer looked uncomfortable but professional. "We have 10,000. Do I hear more from bidder 17? Maya looked at the paddle in her hand, at Whitmore's smug back, at the envelope on her lap that held everything she owned. She remembered Ethan asking if they could have a real house. Riley's worry, Whitmore's voice telling her to go back to her wrenches like she was nothing. like she didn't matter, like people who worked with their hands were too stupid to understand money. She raised the paddle. 10,050. Whitmore's shoulders stiffened. He glanced at him, annoyed now instead of amused. 15,000. Then the man in the crisp white shirt raised his paddle. Everyone turned. 20,000. Silence dropped like a stone. Who was this guy? Whitmore scowled. Unexpected competition from someone he clearly hadn't accounted for. 25. White shirt didn't hesitate. 30. 40,000. Whitmore's voice had an edge now. Irritation creeping in. White shirt looked at his tablet, then slowly shook his head and sat back. He was out. The auctioneer nodded. We have 40,000. Do I hear more? Silence. Whitmore leaned back in his chair, confidence returning. He'd won. Of course he'd won. He always won. 40,000 going once. Maya's fingers tightened on the paddle. Her brain screamed at her to stop, to accept defeat, to protect what little she had left. Going twice. 5 full seconds of silence. The fan rattled. Someone coughed. Then Maya heard her own voice, clear and certain, cutting through the room like a blade. 40,500. Gasps. Actual gasps from multiple people. Whitmore spun around in his chair. What? The auctioneer looked just as shocked. Bid is 40,500 from bidder 17? Maya nodded. Her hand trembled now, but she kept the paddle up. Whitmore stood, face reddening. This is ridiculous. She doesn't have that kind of money. The auctioneer's voice went cold. Iftadino. Sir, sit down. Do you counterbid? Whitmore's jaw worked. He was calculating now, trying to figure out if she was bluffing or insane or both. Finally he sat, but his voice carried venom. 50,000. He thought that would end it, thought she'd fold, thought wrong. 50,500. More gasps. People were standing now, craning to see the woman in the back who just bid more money than most of them made in 2 years. Whitmore's face went from red to purple. 60,000. Long silence. Everyone watched Maya, waiting. The auctioneer's gavel hovered. Maya slowly lowered her paddle. Whitmore relaxed. There it was. She'd finally realized she couldn't win. The natural order reasserting itself. 60,000 going once. The smirk returned to Whitmore's face. Twice. The clerk suddenly stood and walked quickly to the auctioneer, leaning in to whisper urgently in her ear. The auctioneer's eyebrows went up. She nodded. Then her voice rang out louder than before. Bidder 9, please present proof of funds. Whitmore's confidence wavered. I have a credit line with the county. The clerk interrupted. County policy changed last month. Cash or certified check only. Due today at closing. I can get a certified check by Monday. Cash sale. Today. Can you present $60,000 now? Silence. Long, terrible silence. Whitmore's mouth opened and closed. His hands moved toward his phone, then stopped. My bank isn't open Saturday. I can arrange wire transfer. Cannot hold property without payment. Reverting to previous qualified bid. The auctioneer turned to Maya with something that might have been respect in her eyes. Bidder 17, can you present $500 cash today? Maya's hand shook as she reached into her shoen and pulled out the envelope. She'd never been so grateful for anything in her life. Yes, ma'am. The auctioneer paused for just a moment, letting the moment breathe. Then the gavel came down hard. Sold to bidder 17 for $500. The crack of wood on wood echoed like thunder. Whitmore stood frozen, face slack with shock and rage. Then he stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Some people clapped, actually clapped for her, the underdog who'd somehow walked away with the prize. But Maya noticed the man in the crisp white shirt hadn't moved. He sat very still, watching her with flat eyes, and raised his phone to take a photograph. Of her. Of the woman who just won property he'd helped drive the price up on. The clerk called her forward. Maya's legs felt like water, but she walked to the desk and signed the papers. 3 signatures. Handed over the envelope. The clerk counted the bills silently, efficiently, then slid a thick manila envelope across the desk. This has your deed copy, property map, and keys. Official recording happens in 30 days, but the land's yours now. Yours. The word felt impossible. Maya took the envelope and walked out into the bright morning, boots clicking on linoleum that had seen 40 years of people winning and losing at auction. Outside, the sun had climbed higher and the heat was already brutal. But the light looked different, brighter, sharper, like the world had shifted slightly on its axis. She didn't drive home. Her body told her to. Her brain screamed at her to go back, check on Ethan, tell Riley, collapse in relief. But something deeper and older pulled her north instead, toward Coyote Ridge, toward the property that was somehow, impossibly, hers. The road to the ranch wasn't really a road. It started as cracked asphalt, then turned to packed dirt, then gravel, then something barely better than a dry wash. Mesquite branches clawed at her side mirrors. The truck rattled with every dip and embedded stone. Her arms ached from gripping the wheel. She shifted into four-wheel drive low, watching the speedometer hover at 8 miles per hour while the RPMs climbed to 2,200, appropriate for loose gravel with sharp rocks waiting to shred a tire. When she crested the last hill, the ranch came into view and everything in her chest went tight. It looked like a ruin carved from the earth itself. The house was long and low, built in the traditional adobe style, or at least what remained of it, approximately 60 feet wide, 30 feet deep, maybe 10-foot ceiling height. One side of the roof sagged like broken ribs. The porch had half collapsed, boards hanging at angles that defied gravity. White plaster had worn away in patches, revealing sun-baked brown clay beneath. Windows were broken or missing entirely. A shutter hung sideways, creaking in the hot wind. But even in decay, something about it called to her. Behind the structure, the land stretched wide and wild, red mesas, sagebrush, sky so big it made her dizzy. This was hers, all of it. Maya parked and stepped out. The silence pressed against her ears, absolute except for wind and the occasional cry of a raven somewhere in the distance. No cars, no neighbors, just space and time and possibility. She walked slowly toward the house, stepping over fallen boards and weeds that had grown waist-high in the years since anyone cared. The front door leaned open like it had been waiting. Before going inside, she pulled out the sage bundle Claire had given her, struck a match, held flame to dried leaves until smoke rose in gray ribbons. She waved it around the door frame the way her grandmother had taught her years ago. Whispered the prayer in Navajo, the words coming back from childhood memory. A prayer for protection, for safe entry, for whatever might still be listening in this forgotten place. The smoke drifted inside, curling through broken windows and gaps in the walls like it was reading the bones of the building. Then Maya stepped back and looked down. One of the porch boards near the front step was different. Not by much, just slightly different color, slightly different wear pattern, like it had been moved or replaced long after the others. She crouched and ran her fingers along the edge. There, a seam. Her pulse kicked up, but she kept her breathing steady, pulled out her pocket knife, and wedged the blade under the board's edge. It lifted easily, too easily. Underneath was a recessed section about 30 inches square. A trap door, metal ring handle, brass turned green with age. 4 concealed hinges along one side, all of them recently oiled. The metal gleamed. Someone had maintained this. Recently. Maya looked around. No tire tracks except her own, no footprints, no signs of life anywhere. But those hinges were oiled within the last few years, maybe months. Someone had been here. Someone knew about this door. She grasped the ring and pulled. The trapdoor groaned like a wounded animal, hinges moaning with decades of weight. Dust spiraled up from the darkness below, thick and dry, catching in her throat and making her cough. She waved it away with her arm and peered into the opening. Stone stairs, 14 of them, each carved from a single piece of red sandstone, descending into blackness. The walls were raw red rock with visible pick marks from whatever tools had carved this space. No handrail. Width about 36 inches, tight but manageable. The steps looked old but solid. This was hidden, deliberately hidden, not meant for regular use. Something someone wanted to keep secret. Maya went to her truck and grabbed the mag light from the glove box, 6-cell aluminum body, heavy and reliable. She tested it, The beam cut through the dust like a blade. Then she returned to the trap door and stepped onto the first stair. The temperature dropped immediately. Not drastic, but noticeable. Each step down took her deeper into cool dampness that smelled like earth and time, and secrets kept too long. Spiderwebs stretched between exposed wooden support beams in the ceiling. The flashlight caught their silk, turning it silver. At the bottom, a narrow tunnel extended about 8 feet before opening into a larger space. Maya moved slowly, boots scraping stone, every sound amplified by rock walls. The tunnel ended. The chamber began. 15 feet wide, 12 feet deep, 8-foot ceiling, all of it carved directly from bedrock. A massive undertaking that would have required serious equipment in weeks of labor. The floor was smooth and worn from use, not from nature. Someone had walked this space many times. The walls showed pneumatic drill patterns, the kind made by industrial equipment from maybe the 1960s or 70s. The air was exactly 60 degrees, damp, carrying the smell of earth and something else. Something waiting. One battery-powered bulb hung from a wire in the ceiling. Maya reached up and flicked the switch, not expecting anything. The bulb flickered, dimmed, then glowed pale yellow. It still worked. After 40 years, it still worked. That meant someone had changed the batteries. Recently, within the last few months. Her skin prickled. She swept the flashlight across the space, taking in every detail. The chamber was empty except for one thing set into the far wall like a tombstone. A vault. Massive. Industrial. The kind of thing that didn't belong in a house. Maya approached slowly. Not fear, just caution. Methodical steps, flashlight beam steady. The vault door emerged from shadow as she got closer. 52 inches wide, 74 inches tall. Door thickness at least 14 inches, maybe 16. The manufacturer's plate was still visible despite age and dust. Mosler Safe Company, Hamilton, Ohio, Class 5 bank vault door. This wasn't a home safe. This was something built to withstand war. She ran her hand over the cold metal, felt a faint vibration under her palm, like the door was holding back pressure from the other side. The 4-spoke wheel handle was massive, 24 inches in diameter, steel polished smooth by decades. The dial combination lock sat in the center, pristine and functional. Maya stepped closer and read the specifications plate. Resistance to thermal lance, 6+ hours. Resistance to explosives, 15 pounds TNT equivalent. Resistance to drilling, 20+ hours with carbide-tipped bits only. This was designed to protect something that could never, under any circumstances, be stolen or destroyed. She tested the dial. It rotated smoothly. Too smoothly. No grinding, no resistance. Someone had maintained the mechanism. The same someone who'd oiled the hinges and changed the battery. Someone who knew this vault was here and wanted it functional. She tried the handle, pulled hard, nothing. Locked solid. The seal between door and frame was perfect. No pry points, no weaknesses. This thing was engineered to last centuries. Maya backed away, sweeping the flashlight across the rest of the chamber. Completely empty. No boxes, no shelves, no tools or furniture except one thing in the corner. A wooden chair, ladderback style. White sheet draped over it, now gray with 40 years of dust. Someone had sat here, watching this door, waiting. She examined the vault one more time, looking for any clues. Found a serial number etched into the upper right corner, nearly worn away. MSC 5680417. She pulled out her phone. 1 bar of signal, barely enough. Took a photograph of the number, of the vault door, of the empty chamber, of the chair. Then she noticed something else. A small drill mark near the dial, about 1 inch deep. Someone had tried to break in before, had failed, given up. Maya climbed the stone stairs and emerged into sunlight that felt like being born. Her skin prickled as a warmth returned. The house seemed quieter now, expectant, like it knew she'd found its secret and was waiting to see what she'd do. She locked the front door with the first key from the envelope, then pulled out the second key and tried it in the same lock. Didn't fit. Wrong size entirely. If the first key opened the house, what did the second key open? Maya walked back to her truck, mind spinning. The vault was real. The chamber was real. Someone with serious resources had carved out a room under a remote ranch house and installed a bank-grade vault 40 years ago, then kept it maintained, kept the battery fresh, kept the mechanism oiled. She opened the truck door and froze. A black SUV sat on the ridge road about 100 yards away, tinted windows, engine running, visible by the heat shimmer from the exhaust. Watching. Maya's hand moved toward the door handle. The SUV didn't move. Just sat there, engine idling, windows too dark to see through. 5 seconds. 10. Then it slowly pulled away, deliberate and unhurried, disappearing behind the ridge. She got in the truck and locked every door. Her hands shook as she turned the key. The engine started. She looked at the second key from the auction envelope, still in her palm. What did it open? And who else knew about what was buried under the Callaway Ranch? The mobile home felt smaller at night. Maya sat at the kitchen table under the flickering bulb, kids asleep in their rooms, staring at the photograph of the vault on her phone screen. The serial number glowed harsh in the digital light. MSC 5680417. She typed it into the search bar and waited while her connection crawled. Mosler Safe Company, 1960s, military models. The results loaded slowly. Most were useless. Historical articles, collector forums. Then something caught her eye. A discussion thread from 2 years ago about custom vaults in the Southwest. Someone had posted photographs of a similar door installed in a ranch in Texas. Same manufacturer, same era, same impossible weight. The thread ended with one line that made her pulse quicken, only opened after guessing daughter's birthday combination from grandfather's journal. Birthday, personal date, something that mattered. Maya opened a new search. David Callaway, daughter birthday. The results came faster this time. A grainy newspaper clipping from April 2nd, 1972. Local actor celebrates sweet 16 with daughter at ranch. The photograph showed Callaway and a teenage girl standing by a fence, both smiling at the camera. The caption identified her as Sarah. April 1st or 2nd. The party was April 2nd, but birthdays sometimes got celebrated on weekends rather than the actual day. She scribbled both dates in her notebook. Then she searched for locksmith, vault specialist, Arizona. Only one name appeared with the kind of experience that mattered. Flagstaff Lock and Safe Company, 34 years in business. Owner Frank Garrison. She called the number and got voicemail, left a message that probably sounded desperate because it was. 20 minutes later, her phone rang. This the lady with the Mosler vault? The voice was rough, practical, someone who'd spent decades working with his hands. Yes, I bought a property and found it underground. Don't know the combination. Where'd you find a Class 5 vault under a house? Callaway Ranch, about 40 miles east of Red Mesa. Silence on the other end, long enough that Maya thought the connection had dropped. I'll come look, but I can't promise anything. Those are built to outlast nations. Wednesday morning arrived with Frank Garrison's beat-up Tacoma pulling into the ranch at 9:30. The man who climbed out was stocky and sunburnt, wraparound sunglasses hiding his eyes, tattoos running down both forearms in intricate patterns of wrenches and gears, and a safe dial wrapped in flames. The truck's paint was flaking, the company name barely legible on the side panel. They drove in relative silence, except for Frank's occasional observations about the landscape. When they turned onto the dirt road leading to the property, his posture changed. Shoulders back, eyes scanning like he was cataloging every detail. Mosler Class 5, you said. That's what the plate shows. Those aren't standard residential. You see them in bank vaults, once in a decommissioned missile silo, never in a ranch house. Maya pulled up near the collapsed porch. Frank stepped out slowly, studying the adobe structure with the kind of attention that suggested he saw more than decay. He adjusted his sunglasses and scratched his beard through the gray stubble. Cursed or not, this place has presence. You believe in that? He shrugged. I believe in air that turns cold when it shouldn't. They went inside. Maya led him through the house to the trapdoor, already open from her visit the day before. Frank peered down the stone stairs and whistled low. Then he started descending, boots echoing against rock, one hand trailing along the wall. At the bottom, the battery bulb still glowed its weak yellow light. When Frank saw the vault, he stopped moving entirely. 5 full seconds of complete stillness. Then he walked forward like someone approaching an altar and ran his hand over the steel surface with something close to reverence. Well, I'll be damned. That's no homeowner safe. That's something you bury a nation in. He crouched and began his examination, tapping the steel walls with his knuckles, listening to the echo, feeling the seams between door and frame. His fingers traced the dial's edge, brushed dust from the engraved numbers, tested the rotation of the mechanism. Door thickness, 14 to 16 inches. Locking bolts, 6 minimum, maybe 8. Each one about 1.5 inches diameter. Total door weight, probably 4,000 pounds. He stood and tested the dial. It rotated smoothly under his touch, no grinding or resistance. His eyebrows went up behind the sunglasses. Mechanism still operational. Someone maintained this within the last 10 years. How recent? These don't stay smooth after decades of neglect. Someone's been oiling the works, probably within the last few months. Maya felt the information settle like a stone in her gut. The oiled hinges, the fresh battery, the maintained mechanism. Someone had been coming here regularly, someone who knew what was inside and wanted to keep it accessible. Can you drill it? Frank gave her a long look over the top of his sunglasses. I could, but I won't, he explained while examining the boltwork. Drilling a Class 5 door required minimum 20 hours with carbide-tipped bits. Risk of hitting internal mechanisms, impermanently jamming the system. Worse risk was the vibration. This vault was set directly into bedrock. Drilling could crack the chamber walls. If that happened, the whole section might collapse and everything inside would be buried under tons of rock. This isn't just metal. This is history. Someone went to enormous effort to protect whatever's in here. I don't drill unless there's absolutely no other option. What other option is there? Find the combination. Think like whoever said it. He spent another hour examining every inch of the vault, took temperature readings, tried vibration tests with a small device from his toolkit, even pulled out a handheld scanner that blinked red every time he passed it over the dial. Combination lock intact, no digital override, no back door. Whoever shut this intended to take the code to the grave. Frank sat in the old wooden chair, sweat darkening his shirt despite the cool air. He pulled off his sunglasses and rubbed his eyes. You know what people used Class 5 vaults for in the 60s and 70s? War bonds, rare art, film reels, documents that couldn't ever be destroyed or stolen. You don't build something like this unless you are protecting something bigger than yourself. He stood and walked back to the vault one more time. I'll leave you with this. These old locks, especially custom ones, respond better to logic than force. If Calloway built this to be opened by his daughter only, the combination isn't just a number. It's a memory, something she'd know without question. Maya thought about the birthday date, April 1st or 2nd, 1972, but that felt too obvious, too easy for someone else to guess. Frank headed for the stairs. Find someone who was here. Someone who remembers Calloway and his daughter. People leave more clues in conversation than they ever do on paper. After he left, Maya stood alone in the chamber, staring at the vault door. It hadn't rejected her. Not yet. It just needed something she didn't have. Some piece of information that had died with 2 people 40 years ago. She climbed the stairs and emerged into afternoon heat that hit like a wall. By the time she got back to Red Mesa, she'd made a decision. Someone had to remember, someone who'd been close enough to see the daily rhythms of life at that ranch. That night, she searched for anything about Calloway's employees, found a tribal newsletter from 2019 with a feature story on local elders. Elder Henry Whitecloud, 89, reflects on decades as ranch hand, worked for actor David Calloway from 1965 to 1982. Current residence, Denahotso. The photograph showed an old man in a cowboy hat standing by a wooden fence. Maya zoomed in on the fence, the same fence from the birthday photograph of Sarah Calloway. Friday morning, she left early with Ethan buckled in the passenger seat, his backpack on his lap, as always. Riley stayed behind with Clara. The drive to Denahotso took 68 miles across empty highway, where the only traffic was occasional semis hauling goods to somewhere more important. Ethan dozed against the window, head bobbing with the truck's motion. The White Cloud residence sat at the edge of town, where pavement turned to gravel and wind moved slower through the cottonwood trees. The house was modest, 2 bedrooms with a wraparound porch and faded green trim. Juniper bushes bordered the property. A wind chime hung near the screen door, playing its quiet music in the breeze. Maya parked under a crooked tree and helped Ethan out. A woman answered their knock, maybe 40 years old, wearing a red flannel shirt buttoned to the neck. Her silver braid hung over one shoulder. "You're looking for grandfather." Not a question. "Yes, ma'am. I bought Callaway Ranch. I have questions." The woman studied Maya for a long moment. Then she opened the screen door and stepped aside. "Come in. He's on the back porch." They walked through a dim hallway lined with sepia-toned photographs. Rodeo ribbons, black and white snapshots of horses and dusty hills. The smell of cedar and old tobacco hung in the air like memory made solid. Out back under a wide awning, Henry Whitecloud sat in a wooden chair with one leg propped on a stool and a blanket over his knees. He wore a denim shirt with the top button undone and a hat that had seen more years than most men lived. His eyes, cloudy but sharp underneath, tracked them as they approached. "You Morrison's kin?" The name was wrong, but the question made sense. Old memories sometimes got tangled. "No, sir, I'm Maya Stone. I bought the ranch at county auction." Henry sat forward and the wood creaked under him. "You bought it? The whole place?" 15 acres in the house, everything the county was selling." He chuckled, dry and low. "Ain't that something?" Maya stepped closer. "I found something under the house. A vault." Henry's hands on the blanket tensed. He looked away toward the horizon where mesas burned orange in the distance. The silence stretched long enough that Maya thought he wouldn't answer. "I remember. Helped it pour the foundation. Did not know what we were building until too late to ask." "What was it for?" Another long breath, like he was gathering decades of memory into something manageable. "Summer of 1971. We had guests, not tourist types. Suits, government maybe. They stayed a few days, flown in on private plane to Kayenta. Callaway had me and another boy drive them around the back trails. Make sure nobody saw." Maya's pulse picked up. "You think he was hiding something for them?" "I know he was. Could have been film. Could have been evidence. I never asked. But after they left, he had that vault installed. Said if anything ever happened to him, the land would protect it." "Did he tell anyone the combination?" Henry looked at her with those cloudy, sharp eyes. "One person. His daughter." Maya felt the words settle. "She's dead. 2 years after he passed. Car accident at 22. Henry nodded slowly. "I know. Which means the combination might be lost." "Not if you think like him. Callaway wasn't just protecting what was inside. He was building a message. One meant to be found by someone who gave a damn." Maya reached into her bag and pulled out the printed photograph she'd taken at the ranch, the pencil drawing under the wallpaper. Sun over Mesa, date written in a child's hand, March 31st, 1972. Henry studied it and something softened in his expression. "That's her drawing, Sarah's. She'd sit on the porch and sketch while he worked the horses. That's sunrise. That's the ridge behind the stables." "What about the date?" "March 31st. Day before her 16th birthday. But more important, that's the day they buried something." Maya's breath caught. "Buried what?" "Out near the rock with the eagle carving. Not treasure. A key." "Key to the vault?" "Not literal. A clue. Callaway believed in stories, symbols. He said people forget facts, but they remember feelings. If you want to open that vault, stop thinking like a locksmith. Think like a father." Henry reached beside his chair and picked up a small wooden box. Opened it carefully. Inside was a cassette tape with faded ink on the label. "To Sarah for your 16th birthday." "Kept this. Did not know why. Maybe I do now." He handed it to Maya. The plastic case was cracked with age, but the tape inside looked intact. She stared at it, this artifact from 40 years ago, a voice from beyond the grave. "I don't have a tape player." Henry smiled slightly. "Then go find one. Some messages wait a long time to be heard." The drive back to Red Mesa felt longer even though the miles were the same. Ethan woke up and asked where they were going. Maya told him they were looking for history. He nodded like that made perfect sense and went back to watching the desert slide past the window. She drove straight to Red Wing Trading Post. The bell jingled. Clara looked up from sorting books onto a wire rack, glasses low on her nose. I need a tape player. Clara raised an eyebrow but didn't question. She just set the book down and walked to the back room through the beaded curtain that hadn't been replaced since the 80s. The space behind the counter was packed floor to ceiling with electronics from dead decades. Boomboxes and radios and Walkmans and a black and white television balanced on a milk crate. She dug through a cardboard box labeled tapes plus old crap and pulled out a dusty gray cassette deck, blew across the top, wiped it on her shirt, plugged it into the wall outlet. A low whine hummed through the speakers. Still works, mostly. Maya set the tape in the mechanism, her hands steadier than they should have been given what she was about to hear. Clara pressed play. At first nothing, then a crackle, a pop, static clearing like someone sweeping dust from a room. Then David Calloway's voice filled the small back room of the trading post, deep and warm and ragged at the edges like worn leather. Sarah, baby girl, if you're hearing this, I guess I'm not around to ruin the surprise in person. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Maya felt her throat tighten. This was a ghost speaking. A man dead for 40-some years talking to his daughter, who'd never heard these words because she died before he could give them to her. I thought about writing this down, but paper burns. And this is just for you. You remember that trail we used to ride? The one wrapping around Coyote Ridge, dropping behind the stables? Place where the rocks looked like wolves sleeping in sun? I hid something there. Not treasure, but something worth more than money. Tin Bach buried under Eagle Rock. You'll know it when you see it. There was a pause, the sound of him breathing, gathering courage for what came next. And Sarah, if you ever need to open the vault, if things get real bad and you're the only one left, the combination is the day you took your first ride without me. Not the day I taught you, not your birthday. The day you decided to ride alone, the day you came back without needing me. You remember that day, baby? I know you do. Some truths wait for the right person to find them. I love you. Stay strong. Click. The tape stopped. Silence in the back room. Clara leaned against a shelf with her arms crossed. Maya stepped back, trying to process what she just heard. A father's voice, a daughter who never got to listen. And buried somewhere under a rock shaped like an eagle, another piece of the puzzle. He left her a map and a riddle. Clara's voice was quiet. You need to find that rock. Maya pulled out her phone and called Marcus Begay. He was off duty but answered on the second ring. She explained what she'd found, what she needed. He didn't hesitate. I'll meet you at the ranch, dawn tomorrow. Bring water and digging tools. Saturday morning came cold and dark. Marcus pulled up to the ranch in his personal truck at 5:47, headlights cutting through the last of night. He climbed out wearing jeans and a work shirt, tribal police badge clipped to his belt, more from habit than duty. His backpack clinked with the sound of metal tools. You really think there's something buried out there after 40-plus years? Henry said March 31st, 1972. That's specific. Tin box in Arizona soil. Might have rusted through. Then we find rust and move on. They hiked around the back of the property as sunrise painted the sky orange and pink. The trail behind where the stables used to stand was choked with weeds and sage. Their boots crunched over loose rock and the brittle remains of branches long dead. 20 minutes in, Marcus stopped and pointed. A wide, flat stone half buried in wild grass and dust. The marking was worn but visible. An eagle in flight, carved in soft curves that had weathered decades of wind and rain. That's authentic, probably older than Calloway's time. He used an existing landmark. Marcus pulled a metal detector from his pack and swept it over the ground near the stone. The device beeped sharp and insistent at the northern edge. They both dropped to their knees and started brushing away dirt with their hands. 12 inches down, Maya's fingers hit metal. They dug carefully with small shovels, working around whatever was buried there. The tin box came free with a scrape of rust against rock. 8 inches by 6 by 4. Corroded at the edges but still sealed. No lock, just a friction-fit lid that had held for 40 years. Maya pried it open. The lid squealed in protest. Inside was a small leather pouch, a bracelet made of turquoise and shell beads strung on rawhide, and a folded piece of yellowed paper soft with age. She unfolded the letter carefully. The handwriting was the same as the cassette label. Calloway's hand, writing to the daughter who would never read it. Sarah, you don't need me to ride anymore. That's how I know I raised you right. April 11th, 1974. Our ride, your reins. You never looked back. That's the day you became who you were meant to be. That's the combination. If you're reading this, maybe I'm gone. Maybe you need what's in that vault. Use it wisely. Use it bravely. Some truths surface when the world's ready. Love you forever. Dad. Maya stared at the words. Not April 1st or 2nd, not her birthday. At April 11th, 1974, 2 years after she turned 16, the day she rode alone and proved she didn't need him anymore. The day she became herself. Marcus looked over her shoulder at the letter. April 11th, 74. That's the code? That's what he says. You trust it? Maya thought about the man's voice on the tape. The father hiding something he believed mattered more than his own safety. The care taken to leave clues in places only someone who understood him would find. He buried this for her, no reason to lie in a hidden box. She slipped the bracelet into the leather pouch and tucked both into her jacket pocket. They hiked back to the house as the sun climbed higher and heat began pressing down in earnest. Inside, the trap door waited like a mouth. They descended together, flashlights on, boots echoing against stone. The chamber felt colder than before. The battery bulb flickered overhead. The vault stood exactly as Maya had left it, patient as the bedrock around it. She approached the dial with Marcus standing behind her, flashlight beam steady on the mechanism. Her hand reached out. Fingers touched cold metal. She began the sequence Frank had described. 4 full clockwise rotations to clear any previous attempts. Stop at 04, counterclockwise past 04 to stop at 11, clockwise to 74. She paused, listened at the dial the way Frank had taught her, heard a faint click inside the mechanism, metal engaging with metal in the precise way it had been engineered to do. Maya grasped the 4-spoke wheel handle, 24 inches of solid steel. She pulled. Resistance at first, decades of stillness, fighting against movement. She pulled harder, a deep thunk reverberated through the chamber. Locking pins releasing, bolts retracting into the door's body. The wheels spun halfway. The door groaned, 4,000 pounds of steel and tungsten carbide moving like a glacier. Cool air rushed out from the vault's interior, carrying the smell of archives and secrets and time compressed into physical form. Marcus stepped forward with the flashlight. They both peered into the darkness beyond the threshold. Shelves lined both sides of the interior space. Heavy cardboard boxes stacked carefully. Film reels, 16mm size, dozens of them. Leather-bound ledgers standing upright like books in a library. A vintage typewriter, manual mechanism. File boxes labeled with dates spanning years. And overhead, a single bulb connected to a backup battery system that still functioned after 4 decades. Maya stepped inside. 8 feet deep, 6 feet wide, ceiling 8 feet high. Everything organized with deliberate precision, climate-controlled, which explained the working battery system. Whoever built this had intended for the contents to survive indefinitely. She opened the nearest box. Film reels, each one labeled in careful handwriting. Santa Fe, 1969. El Paso Trials. Code Red Witness. Site 7B, do not copy. Her fingers moved to the next shelf. One of the leather ledgers came free with a whisper of aged binding. She opened to the first page. Handwritten logs. Dates. Coordinates. Names. June 14th, 1969. Meeting with Colonel Harrison, Department of Defense. Discussed relocation protocols. June 18th, 1969. Site inspection. 37 families marked for transfer. June 22nd, 1969. Transfer initiated. No consent obtained. The words sat on the page like accusations. Maya's hands went cold. This wasn't movie memorabilia. This wasn't personal correspondence. This was documentation of something that should never have happened. Marcus stepped closer, reading over her shoulder. His voice came out quiet and tight. My grandfather. He told stories about trucks at night, families disappearing, officials saying it was temporary relocation for water testing. They never came back. Maya moved to the next shelf. Stacks of letters, official correspondence with government seals faded but still visible. She pulled one free. The addressee line made her stomach drop. Senator R. Kellerman, confidential. She read the first paragraph. This letter constitutes sworn testimony regarding unsanctioned military operations on sovereign tribal lands between 1965 and 1973. Evidence includes photographic documentation, witness statements, and internal memoranda detailing experimental protocols conducted without informed consent. This wasn't a celebrity vault. This was an evidence archive, documentation of government crimes spanning years. Operations that had been buried, classified, destroyed everywhere except here in a sealed room under a forgotten ranch. Marcus backed away slowly, his face slack with the realization of what they'd stumbled into. This is dangerous. Maya nodded. The vault hadn't just protected documents. It had protected the truth. And now that truth was loose in the world because she'd opened the door that was never supposed to open again. Then they heard it, footsteps on the floor above them. Slow, deliberate, not wind, not settlement. Someone walking through the house. Both flashlights went off immediately. They stood in darkness except for the weak bulb overhead. The footsteps moved closer, stopped at the trapdoor. Light from outside shafted down the stairs. A voice called down, male and calm and carrying authority. "Hello? This is Sheriff Owen Navarro. I know someone's down there, just looking to talk." Maya's hand found Marcus's arm in the darkness. Squeezed once. He understood. Stay quiet. Don't move. The footsteps started descending. Boots on stone, each step echoing like a countdown. Sheriff Navarro appeared at the bottom of the stairs. 48 years old, full uniform, wide-brimmed hat casting shadow over his features. His hands stayed visible and empty, palms slightly raised in a gesture meant to look non-threatening. "Didn't mean to startle you. Saw the door open. Thought maybe someone got hurt. Place like this wouldn't take much." Maya made a decision. Hiding accomplished nothing. She stepped toward the stairs, Marcus close behind. "You scared us pretty bad." "Sorry about that." Navarro's eyes moved past her to the open vault door. Lingered there just long enough to confirm he understood what he was seeing. Then his gaze returned to Maya's face. "Why are you really here?" "Got a call from a lawyer in Flagstaff. Richard Kellerman, big firm. Says he represents the Callaway estate. Claims the property was never legally transferred. Will designated the land as family trust. Auction documents didn't say anything about a trust." "I believe you. Doesn't mean it won't get complicated. They're pushing hard. Like this is more than just old land." Maya's response came before she could stop it. "It is." Navarro's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. He glanced at the vault again, then back to her. "You opened that. About me." She nodded. "What's inside?" Maya chose her words carefully. "I don't think I should say. Not yet." The sheriff studied her for a long moment. Then he stepped back toward the stairs. "You've got my number from when I contacted you yesterday. Use it if someone shows up unannounced. If that lawyer wants to play rough, he'll bring men, not words. People with money don't like losing to people without it." He climbed the stairs and disappeared. Engine sound filtered down a minute later, fading as he drove away. Marcus let out a breath he'd been holding. "Think he'll come back?" "Don't know, but he warned us. That counts for something." They spent the next 2 hours photographing everything they could. Every file box label, every film reel title, sample pages from the ledgers, letters with government seals. Maya's phone storage filled up and they switched to Marcus's phone. The archive was too large to move quickly. Hundreds of pounds of material. Multiple trips would be needed and every trip increased the risk of being caught. In one file box, Maya found a manila envelope marked Site 7B, photographic evidence. She opened it carefully. Inside were grainy black and white photographs. Men in military uniforms with no insignia. Trucks with license plates covered. A burial site with people holding shovels. A line of Native Americans in blankets, backs to the camera, faces turned away from whoever was documenting their displacement. On the back of one photograph, someone had written in pencil, Site 7B, transfer complete, June 1969. Marcus took the photo from her hands, stared at it. His fingers trembled slightly, the only sign of emotion breaking through his usual control. My grandfather was relocated in '69 from the Black Rock area. This might be documentation of what happened to him. Maya's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, she played the message on speaker so Marcus could hear. A male voice, clipped and professional. Ms. Stone, my name is Richard Kellerman. I represent the legal interests of the Calloway Family Trust. I'm requesting that you immediately cease all access to the property pending review of ownership status. I'll be arriving in person within 72 hours. I expect full cooperation. Thank you. No callback number. No option to respond. Just a countdown clock starting to tick. Marcus looked at the open vault, at the evidence surrounding them. 72 hours. He's giving you 3 days. Because he's already on his way, or because he knows we found something. Both. Maya took one film reel from its box, code red witness, and one envelope of photographs. Site 7B. If they took the vault, she'd still have proof, still have something to show the world what had been hidden here. They climbed the stairs and emerged into afternoon light that felt harsh after the chamber's darkness. Outside, fresh tire tracks marked the dirt. Heavy vehicle, commercial grade. Not the sheriff's cruiser. Someone else had been here. Watching. Waiting. The countdown had started. In 72 hours, Richard Kellerman would arrive with lawyers and leverage, and all the machinery of power that came with money. Maya looked at Marcus. I need help. People who understand what this evidence means. Tribal council? Bigger. We need someone who knows how to handle evidence like this, how to protect it legally. And we need it done before Kellerman gets here. Maya nodded. The vault was open. The secret was loose. And now the question was what to do with truth that powerful people had spent 40 years trying to keep buried 6 feet under a forgotten ranch in the Arizona desert. Word count, 6,497 words. Characters, no spaces, 34,076. That night, Maya gathered everyone who mattered at the community center. Clara arrived first, arms already crossed like she was bracing for impact. Pastor Samuel Yazzie came through the door with the weight of someone who'd presided over too many funerals. Grace Yellowhorse, 67 and sharp as broken glass, walked with her cane but moved like she could still chase down a story on foot. Henry Whitecloud sat near the front, Margaret beside him, both of them silent witnesses to history about to repeat itself. Marcus stood by the door, badge visible, making it clear this gathering had protection even if unofficial. Maya laid everything on the folding tables. Printed photographs from the vault, photocopies of ledger pages, the film reel in its canister, the letter from Calloway, the cassette tape, evidence spread like accusations across cheap laminate. I opened the vault 3 days ago. Inside is documentation of government operations on tribal lands in the 60s and 70s. Forced relocations, experiments without consent, cover-ups that lasted decades. She showed them the photographs. Soldiers without names, trucks without plates, people being moved like cargo. Grace picked up one of the letters and read it slowly, lips moving over words that shouldn't exist. These signatures, I recognize them. Senator Kellerman, Armed Services Committee. Colonel Harrison, Special Operations. This isn't local. This is national conspiracy. Pastor Yazzie looked at the photo of Site 7B, the line of people with their backs turned, and his jaw tightened. How many families? Grace checked the legend. Based on these logs, conservatively 200 displaced. Probably more. Henry spoke from his chair, voice carrying despite his age. I was there that summer, saw the trucks, white men in suits asking questions they had no business asking. Then people started disappearing. Officials said water contamination, temporary evacuation. Nobody came back. The room sat with that for a moment. Then Riley pushed through the door, breathless, holding her phone. Mom, someone's at the garage. They cut the power to the mobile home. Maya's blood went cold. Clara was already moving. Take the kids to my place. Marcus, you call patrol. Already on it. By the time Maya got back to Yazzie Auto, the power company truck was leaving. The cut had been clean, professional, meant to send a message. You're vulnerable. We can reach you anytime. She stood in the dark garage and felt rage burn through the fear. When she returned to the community center an hour later, everyone was still there, waiting. She walked to the front, and the decision crystallized like ice forming over deep water. They offered me $2 million to stay quiet. Silence. Then Riley's voice from the doorway. Mom, that's enough to fix everything. Maya turned to look at her daughter, 15 years old and already learning that money could buy silence, could bury truth, could make problems disappear if you were willing to pretend they never existed. Some things matter more than money. If I take that deal, 200 families stay forgotten. The people who did this never face consequences. And we teach you that truth has a price tag. Riley's eyes filled, but she nodded. I'm going public, tomorrow, press conference. Anyone who wants to tell their story can tell it. Anyone who wants justice can stand with me. Grace pulled out her phone. I still know people, reporters who won't bury this. Give me 2 hours. The next morning started with Preston Whitmore's Lexus pulling into the garage lot at 8:15. Maya was under a Ford Ranger, changing oil, when she heard the diesel engine. She didn't come out right away. Made him wait. When she finally rolled out on the creeper and stood, wiping her hands, he was leaning against his hood with that same superior smile. But something was different. Less mockery, more calculation. Miss Stone, we need to talk about what you found under that ranch. How do you know what I found? He pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph. Maya at the auction, taken by the man in the crisp white shirt, the one who'd helped drive the bidding up before dropping out. You think you won that auction fair and square? I was there to make sure the price went high enough that you'd give up. When you kept bidding with that $500 play, I was supposed to go to $100,000. Push you out completely. Maya felt understanding click into place. But I called your bluff. New county policy about cash payments. Exactly. Clever move. Didn't matter though. You were never supposed to keep that property. Who hired you? Same people who hired Richard Kellerman. Same people who've spent 40 years making sure that vault stayed closed. Federal contractors, former government officials, people with everything to lose if what's inside goes public. He straightened, adjusting his Rolex like time still belonged to him. They're prepared to offer you $2 million, cash, in exchange for everything in that vault and complete non-disclosure. Clean exit, new life for you and your kids. And if I refuse, the smile disappeared, then they drag you through courts for years, investigate every corner of your life, your finances, your custody arrangements. That DUI you got when Riley was 3, the child services investigation that followed. They'll make you wish you'd stayed poor and quiet. He handed her a business card, expensive stock with embossed lettering. You have 72 hours. Think about your children. Think about what matters. After he left, Maya stood holding the card and feeling sick. The DUI had been 8 years ago. One stupid mistake after her father died when she tried to drive home crying and got pulled over. The case got dismissed. Child Services closed their file. Ancient history. But they dug it up. They'd researched her. They knew exactly which pressure points to hit. She walked into the office and called the number Grace had given her. A reporter named Elena Martinez, who worked for an independent tribal news network, explained everything. The vault, the evidence, the threats. Elena didn't hesitate. We run the story tomorrow, 3 o'clock. Bring everyone who will talk. Then Maya made another call. Grace had mentioned a name. Thomas Benally, a man who'd been at Site 7B as a child, who'd kept silent for 43 years because silence was safer than truth. He lived in Farmington, running a salvage yard on the edge of town. The drive took 2 hours. Maya went alone, leaving Marcus to watch the ranch. The yard was exactly what she expected. Rows of crushed vehicles like tombstones. A shack with an office barely bigger than a closet. A sleeping dog in the shade. Thomas came to the door when the bell jangled. 57 years old with a gray ponytail and eyes that had seen things he'd spent decades trying to forget. When Maya showed him the photograph from Site 7B, he stared at it for a full minute without speaking. Finally, his voice came out rough. You found it. I did, and I need you to tell people what happened. He gestured for her to follow. They drove in his truck for 30 minutes into empty desert before he pulled over and cut the engine. When he spoke, the words came like something that had been buried alive and finally clawed its way to the surface. I was 9 years old, June 14th, 1969. 2 in the morning, military trucks rolled into our land. Men in uniforms told my mother it was emergency water contamination. We had 20 minutes to pack, 1 bag each. They said we'd be gone a few days. His hands gripped the steering wheel even though the truck wasn't moving. They took us to a collection point, maybe 40 families. White men with clipboards taking names. I saw them loading wooden crates into the ground. Big ones. Watched them dig trenches and bury whatever was in those boxes. My mother asked what they were burying. They told her to mind her business. Where did they take you? Housing project in Albuquerque. Said our original land was contaminated, unsafe to return. No compensation, no explanation, just gone. Your mother testified to Congress. 1974, subcommittee hearing. She told them everything. They entered her testimony into the record and did nothing. Called her confused, unreliable witness. Then men came to our apartment. Not police, contractors. Said we'd be relocated again if she didn't stop talking. Said I'd never see my mother if I spread lies. He looked at Maya with 43 years of silence in his eyes. I was 14. I believed them. Kept quiet ever since. Will you speak now? I'm 57. My mother's dead. I don't scare easy anymore. You give me a microphone, I'll tell them what I saw. This is long overdue. Silence is violence, and we've been bleeding quietly too long. Grace brought her recording equipment. Thomas told his story again, all of it, names and dates and details that matched the ledgers from the vault. When he finished, Grace saved 3 copies to different devices. Insurance against deletion. Friday afternoon, the community center filled beyond capacity. 60 people crammed into a space meant for 40. 6 camera crews. 8 journalists with notepads. In the back row, 3 men in suits sat perfectly still, not recording, just watching. One of them was Preston Whitmore. Pastor Yazzie opened with a prayer that was really an indictment. We gather because truth has been buried too long, not in earth but in silence, in fear, in legal threats meant to keep people quiet. Today that ends. Today we speak. Maya stood at the podium with no notes because the truth didn't need preparation. 3 days ago, I opened a vault under Callaway Ranch. Inside was documentation of government operations on tribal lands between 1965 and 1973, forced relocations without consent, experiments without disclosure, cover-ups that lasted 40 years. These aren't rumors. These are documents with signatures, photographs with dates, testimony from people who lived it. Henry Whitecloud came to the podium next, Margaret helping him stand. His voice carried the weight of 92 years. I helped build that vault in 1971. David Calloway told me he was protecting something that couldn't be lost. He was right. What's in that vault is evidence of crimes. I'm grateful it's finally seeing light. Then Thomas Benally stood, no hesitation, no fear. Just a man who'd carried silence for 43 years and decided it was finally time to put it down. June 14th, 1969. I was 9 years old. 2 a.m., military trucks at our home. Emergency evacuation, they said. Water contamination. We never came back. He described everything. The collection point, the burial of crates, the white men without names, the children crying, the officials lying, his mother's testimony, and the nothing that followed. When he reached the end, his voice didn't waver. They called my mother confused, unreliable. I'm here to say she told the truth, and I'm telling it again. Not for revenge, for recognition. So 200 families stopped being forgotten. The room sat in absolute silence when he finished. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone. Thomas nodded once and sat down. The back door opened. Richard Kellerman entered with 2 associates, both in expensive suits that screamed federal money. He didn't sit, just stood at the back with arms crossed, making his presence a threat. Maya saw him and didn't flinch. She answered questions from reporters with Kellerman's eyes boring into her back. Grace provided historical context. Marcus confirmed he'd seen the evidence personally. The weight of proof accumulated like stones building a wall that couldn't be ignored. When the press conference ended, Kellerman approached Maya directly. His voice stayed low but carried venom. You've made serious allegations without full context. I've presented documents. Let people decide the context. Those documents are property of the Calloway estate. Those documents are evidence of crimes. Different category entirely. His jaw tightened. You don't understand the forces you're dealing with. I understand exactly. That's why I went public. This isn't over. Legal action proceeds. You'll be deposed, investigated, your life examined under microscope. They'll make you regret this. Maya met his stare without blinking. Let them try. Kellerman left. The journalists scattered to file their stories. By 6 that evening, the local news led with Hidden Vault reveals government secrets. By 8, Santa Fe and Phoenix picked it up. By midnight, social media turned Site 7B into a trending topic. People across the Southwest started sharing similar stories. Families disappeared, land taken, questions never answered. The pattern wasn't isolated. It was systematic. Saturday morning, 200 people gathered at Black Rock Crossing without any official organization. They just came. Families of relocated victims, community members, tribal leaders. Someone brought a red cloth and made a memorial. Others wrote names on paper and tied them to fence posts. By afternoon, Tribal Council had organized a formal dedication ceremony. Sunday morning, they installed a sign, Site 7B, in memory of those buried by silence. Below it, a list of 32 confirmed names with space for more because the research was just beginning. Thomas stood before the crowd and spoke again, his voice steady. This ground remembers what the government tried to forget. Our grandparents carried these stories in whispers. Today, we say them out loud. Not to bury the past, but to finally let it surface and heal. A woman stepped forward, 62 years old, gray braid, turquoise earrings, holding a notebook pressed to her chest. Her voice shook but held. My mother died before she could speak, but she left me this. She opened the notebook, page after page of handwritten testimony, names of officials, maps of sites, the name of the officer who forced them out at gunpoint, dates and locations and witnesses. Everything her mother had been too afraid to say out loud but couldn't stop herself from documenting. I don't need them to hear me. I just want them to be seen. Maya stepped forward and placed her hand over the woman's. We see them. Monday morning, major networks ran the story. Tuesday, congressional hearings were announced. By Wednesday, the Department of Interior issued a statement acknowledging historical injustices under previous administrations and promising review. It was carefully worded political language that meant everything and nothing, but it was admission, on record, official. Grace organized a foundation. Clara and several tribal council members formed the board. They filed paperwork to establish a public trust under tribal sovereignty, bypassing state law entirely. The trust would own the ranch, preserve the evidence, provide access to researchers, and support affected families. Maya signed the deed over Thursday morning. Kellerman withdrew his legal challenge Friday. No explanation. Just a one-line statement from his firm indicating they no longer represented interests in the matter. Preston Whitmore was nowhere to be found. Word was he'd left Arizona entirely. 3 months passed. The barn became an exhibit hall with government funding that came quietly, no press releases, just money appearing in accounts like Conscience trying to buy its way into heaven. The vault remained sealed most days but open for guided tours by appointment. Educational programs started. School groups visited. Historians requested access. A plaque went up at the entrance with Calloway's words, "If I couldn't fix it, I could at least make sure it couldn't be forgotten." People came, some in buses, some alone, descendants searching for family information, others bringing soil from where ancestors had vanished. Some carried names written on scraps of paper, asking if there was room to add one more grandmother, one more uncle, one more child who disappeared and was never spoken of again. The archive grew. 40 hours of recorded testimony, 2,000 documents, 16 film reels, 87 confirmed names on the memorial with new ones added monthly, as families found courage to come forward. Maya ran the center with a small staff. Ethan helped at the visitor desk after school, still 8 but more confident and proud of what his mother had done. Riley worked summer internships cataloging documents, 15 and understanding why some fights mattered more than money. Maya still did mechanical work, fixing the center's vehicles and teaching maintenance skills to young people who needed practical knowledge as much as they needed history. That night, she sat on the porch with Ethan wrapped in an old quilt beside her. Stars blinked open across the sky, patient and eternal. Wind moved through the canyon, carrying the smell of sage and rain that might come tomorrow or might wait another month. The archive center sat solid behind them, lights glowing warm in the windows. Ethan leaned his head against her shoulder. "Mom, are the ghosts gone?" She thought about David Calloway leaving clues for a daughter who never found them. About Sarah dying before she could hear her father's voice on tape. About Henry and Thomas and 200 families whose names were finally being spoken aloud. About the truth that had waited 40 years to surface. No, baby, but now they're not alone. The wind picked up, moving through the canyon like breath. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and another answered. The land remembered everything. It always had. People just had to be willing to listen, to dig beneath the surface, to open the doors that were supposed to stay closed, to speak the truths that powerful men spent lifetimes trying to bury. Maya looked at the archive center, at the light in the windows, at the memorial where names kept being added. This was what remained when silence finally broke. Not revenge, not even justice in any complete sense. Just recognition. Just the stubborn insistence that what happened mattered, that people mattered, that their stories deserved to be told and remembered and passed on to children who would never meet them, but would know their names. The ghosts weren't gone, but they weren't buried anymore either. And in the space between those two truths, something like peace could begin to grow.
Wenn ich einen Main hole, können wir es probieren.
Ah, da ist sie.
Nimm die Orbe, okay.
Ah, es wird.
Einer Wall muss.
Ja, okay.
Main. Schade. Aber
Egal, alle
gute Picks noch.
Oh, die ist so cool. Jetzt ist die Fente wieder weg. Nein. Hatte jemand von euch die Bubblegum?
Das
Sollte auf jeden Fall irgendwie.
Oh mein Gott, ich brauch die.
Smoke oder eine Gift
Ja.
reinschmeißen.
Dankeschön.
Ja, wir brauchen.
Gehen einfach
Also.
raus.
Die gehen einfach raus. Wir brauchen
Der
irgendwas.
Killsound ist ultra satisfying, hä? Die ist voll geil.
Der thront halt auch am Anfang.
Ja, aber eigentlich, also die gehen
Will
Mitte
mehr für mir,
raus.
will mir
Wenn
aufsteigen.
du jetzt close mit Shotgun stehst. Weißt du.
Ja.
Das wollte ich nur damit
Da
sagen.
kann ich nicht sagen, Tom. Aber ich steig gerne mit dir auf.
Das ist jetzt noch 2B.
AK, kein Step.
War bei uns.
Ja.
Jet raus. Jet dead.
Frag im Discord, Tom, wenn du ein Duo brauchst. Frag im Discord. Vielleicht findet sich jemand.
Oh, 80 auf. Viper hat hier geultet. Sova ist hier so hingelaufen. Wird wahrscheinlich gehealt.